Well, let's stay with the story now and go to Borzou Daragahi, who's a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Daragahi. First of all, of course, any Palestinian leader would be more than happy to see the Saudis come to visit Ramallah and East Jerusalem. It's only a sign of their connection with the rest of the Arab world. But there is this ghost of the normalization deal in the background, which must make the Palestinians feel threatened.
I mean, I think there's a few things going on here. First of all, we're talking only about one Palestinian faction right now. And with regard to many analysts, they would consider it right at this point, perhaps the weakest Palestinian faction. No one mentioned in any of the reports that I've heard so far, the boogeyman in this whole scenario, Hamas, as well as Islamic Jihad, and the kind of radical agenda that they have, and the power that they have, both in the street in terms of weaponry and so on, but also in terms of their support among the Palestinian people. And these guys don't have a seat at the table of whatever discussion is going on here. I think that's one thing that's going on. Another thing that's going on is that Saudi Arabia is manipulating the U.S. They're dangling the prospect of normalization with Israel because they want concessions from Washington. What do they want? They want security guarantees, and they want U.S. support for their own nuclear program. They want to have enrichment on their own soil. And so they're, they understand that the Biden administration, which has sort of shown its cards in wanting this normalization, is eager for this. Ahead of 2024 elections, and they're sort of dangling this prospect in hopes of getting those concessions.
So really, this is not a story about Israel or the Palestinian territories or even about the United States. This is a story about Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman.
It's about the United States. It's about getting the United States on board. The United States is so eager for this deal for some mysterious reason, and analysts are confused as to what the U.S. gets out of Israeli-Saudi normalization. It's obvious what Saudi gets. Saudi would get good graces of Washington after the fiasco and the debacle of Jamal Khashoggi. Saudi Arabia would get, you saw the Israeli tourism minister. There's a lot of Israelis going to the United Arab Emirates for tourism. Very few people from the United Arab Emirates go to Israel for tourism. They feel they have better options. I think that the Saudis would like some of those tourism monies. You're talking about the Minister of Communications of Israel visiting Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia would like to get its hands on some of the high-tech surveillance electronic equipment that the Israeli high-tech industry produces. That's another thing they would love to have. So it's obvious what Saudi gets. Israel, what do they get out of normalization? They already have pretty normal relations with those particular Gulf Arab states. They even have pretty decent relations with Qatar. So it's obvious. Netanyahu seems to want this. No one else in his government seems to really care about normalization with Arab countries. They're more interested in gobbling up more Palestinian land. So it's really a story about Netanyahu and the U.S. and basically Saudi Arabia trying to get what it can with an administration that has very few foreign policy victories in Washington.
We used to call it the Arab Street, didn't we? Which was always something that felt very strongly, or was believed to feel very strongly about the Palestinian cause, and the leaders of all the Arab countries had to always pay lip service to that cause as well. This surely still remains an element of a sticking point for Riyadh in terms of normalization with Israel. It has to show that it takes Palestine seriously.
It has to show that it takes Palestine seriously, and I think as long as the king is alive, King Salman is alive. MBS, he grew up in a different generation. They didn't experience the Palestinian struggle. People who are in their 30s. But MBS's father, the king, he did very much experience that. That is a very important thing for his generation. As long as he's alive, there's not going to be any kind of, my guess, my speculation, and it's the speculation of a lot of informed analysts, there's not going to be a serious normalization without some kind of concessions to the Palestinians. And then it becomes a really complicated question. It's not just about who do you speak to on the Israeli side, the government, Netanyahu, or his radical cabinet? It's also about who do you speak to on the Palestinian side, this extremely weak Palestinian Authority, or the armed groups, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and lurking in the background, their primary backer, the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Indeed. Borzou Daragahi, thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening on TRT.